It's time for another big weekend in horse racing. We're going to talk about the 4 stakes races at Oaklawn Park on Saturday. It's the road to the Kentucky Derby. There are Kentucky Derby points on the line in the Rebel. There are Kentucky Oaks points on the line in earlier on in the Honeybee. And we are going to take a look at the all stakes pick 4 that goes from races 8 through 11 on Saturday at Oaklawn Park. I say we, that is me, Gino Bucola, and my good friend Barry Spears, the sniper, as we dive into the daily racing form, past performances. We'll be taking a look at the Formulator past performances. They are part of the all access PPs that you can actually get for free when you sign up for DRF bets. Right off the bat, they'll give you a $200 match deposit bonus and then 10 free sets of these all access past performances. Following that, every time you bet 50, you get another credit for past performances. Barry, it's the fun time of the year, buddy. Every week we've got just like a different set of stakes races at a different track with a Kentucky Derby prep and Oaks prep. Last week we saw some good ones at Fairgrounds with a couple, I think, really strong winners of the Rachel and of the Risen Star. And now this week we'll have the Rebel, which may not be as strong top to bottom, but we do have a heavy favorite. And that we will have, I think, in all 4 of the races, we talk about some really short price favorites in each race.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this time, the waters get deeper and deeper as the months get closer to Derby Day, and these races at Oaklawn are no exception. I mean, there's some horses that have to step up and make their presence felt, or they're probably going to be off the trail. So this is always exciting. These favorites, some of them I think are beatable, some of them I don't. So um, we'll just go through it, and this is obviously just such a fun time of year. I can't, every year around this time, it's like, man, I just love it.
So next week there'll be the Fountain of Youth Day at Gulfstream Park, which you and I will talk about those stakes races. There will also be the Big Cap Day at Santa Anita and another prep race for the Kentucky Derby there. It'll also be at Aqueduct, another prep race for the Kentucky Derby. So we will have 3 more preps next weekend. That will be a big weekend. But for this weekend, focus will be Oaklawn. There's the Saudi Cup on Saturday. I know a lot of people will be paying attention because there's some big horses running from the U.S. That'll be in the big race over there. And Oaklawn gets the spotlight this weekend. Let's dive into race number 8, Barry. This one is the carousel for fillies and mares, older fillies and mares sprinting, going 6. So as we dive into the DRF past performances, we will take a look towards the outside at a couple of the heavy favorites in here. Mucho Macho Girl, not Mucho Macho Man. The girl here, she's a really talented filly. It's pretty tough to knock her overall form. She's won 3 of her 4 starts, and the one race that she didn't win was making her first start off a long layoff. She was also at Keeneland going 6.5. So her races at 6 furlongs or shorter, she's a perfect 3 for 3. She's super quick. And right next door to her, Barry, will be Zietlos, who is also really sharp in nice form. They're both trying to win their 3rd in a row. Imagine that Mucho Macho Girl will be a little more forwardly placed, and the 8 will be trying to come from off the pace a little bit more.
Yeah, yep, that's exactly how I read it. And really what this race comes down to is who is going to kind of get out in front early with Mucho Macho Girl, because if she
Mm-hmm.
gets in a little tussle early, I think she might have a little bit of her hands full,
I agree.
especially with a horse like Zeitlos who's outside of her. Because if nobody goes, Zeitlos could actually run fast enough to be like on her
Close.
flank.
Yeah, not
And
too far off.
right, and Tyler Gaffleone, will he's kind of has the garden spot of all the horses in this race, because that horse is particularly right next to him. Um, so I think that makes Zeitlos to me a standout in this situation.
She seems a little bit less vulnerable maybe than just Mucho Macho Girl because I think of her versatility.
Yeah, not only that, but she's got way more races under her belt. She's got
Foundation.
twice as much. Yeah, and she understands how to run. She's done
Mm-hmm.
it more times. That's got to count for something.
Yep.
And there wasn't really too many alternatives in this race beyond those 2, but I do think the one, Adeline Julia, could make her presence felt if things kind of go a little sideways.
The 2 horses I wanted to mention were at that weren't the favorites were the two inside horses. I'm glad you mentioned Adeline Julia because her form early on in her career was really good.
Oh,
She
absolutely.
has a couple races that would no doubt compete with this group. And if she were to run those type races, I think a mile might be, I think she's a little better just going shorter. And if you look at her last two races, they look a bit disappointing. They're not that bad, honestly. Her fifth last time out was behind Alva Star, who would be heavy favorite in this race.
Mm-hmm.
She was back here again. She won, making her first start of the year, and she was the heavy favorite that day. She'll probably be running at Keeneland, I think, next, most likely, if she doesn't come back somewhere else before that. But she's super talented. And so I don't really knock her for those last two races quite as much. And she's another one who, kind of like Zeitlos, right? She can get herself close enough, but she can definitely finish.
Yeah, and that's the appeal for me is she's going to be in range, and I think being on the rail does force her hand a little bit, um, to where she might have to go a little bit quicker than she may want to, but that might not be the worst thing in the world, and especially with this group, kind of to get out in front of the riffraff, if you will, and kind of make her own trip from there. So, if she's somewhere around 10 to 1, I have to give her a really second look.
The big price I'm going to throw in the mix and some exactas and tries with some of the short prices in here is the 2 Shandonna. This is an indie bred, so she's just a little like cut below probably the top tier of fillies in this race and mares. But if you start to dive into her overall form, so if we can just notice right off the bat, she's won a couple races on and off track, but she's much better on a fast track overall. She's been in the money in 15 of 19, and just looking at speed figures alone, by far she's run her better races on a traditional fast dirt track. Just look at her last 3 races, for example. 2 of them were on muddy tracks, and the one that wasn't, she finished second by a neck right here at Oaklawn in a stakes race, beat I'm the Boss of Me, and she ran really well, kind of getting a trip that you and I are pointing out with other horses that we might be looking for, right? Where she was sitting 2, 3, like not that far off, and she can finish. So is she quite as good as maybe the 2 to the outside if they were to run their best race? No, probably not. But she's got some seasoning here. And when you start to dive into her form overall, like, eliminate those 2 races that were just on the muddy tracks, and now all of a sudden, look how much better that form looks. You've got a second beat in the neck. You've got back-to-back victories here at Indy, one against Open Company. You've got a good runner-up effort here, just couldn't get to a lone speed winner. And her last 3 losses to Alva Star, High Class, back to Ohio, and to Cotty Flatter in all of those races. So her last 4, those were all races where they were won by a horse that went wire to wire.
Yeah, it was kind of telling, about that, muddy track form, that she came back in 2 weeks
Mm-hmm.
to run in the poinsettia.
Yep.
Um,
They just,
I-
the barn was just like, let's just put a line through it and bring it right back, right?
right, exactly. Like, she didn't do much running in that race anyway. Probably didn't take much out of her, and she was claimed that day too. That was also interesting, and they came
We got
back
the
real
same,
quick.
almost the same sort of thing here, right? She's back in 20 days, not a little bit less, 3 weeks, not 2, but they bring her back quick. Just feel like that didn't take a whole lot out of her. And, at a big price, I'm definitely using her in some, tries and along with some of the other like super logicals. I think she's kind of sneaky in here when you do a little digging with some of those races. And looking at the weather, it's supposed to be pretty good on Saturday.
Oh,
It's
that's good. See, I didn't know that. That's what I was just going to ask you, if
yeah,
the
I think
weather report says no rain, because that track is always muddy.
So fingers crossed, a few days out as we record this on Wednesday. This is the kickoff leg of that all stakes pick 4. And then the next 3 races in the pick 4 sequence are all graded stakes races. We have the grade 3 Honeybee, where you have Kentucky Oaks points on the line for 3-year-old fillies. And Barry, in this one, a horse that you liked and I thought was going to run really well last week at Fairgrounds, scratched out of that race for Brad Cox and came over here to run. She'll probably be the favorite in this race, West Omaha. I think her body of work compared to some of the others in here is just much better so far. She has speed. She can sit off the pace a little bit. And when Brad Cox scratched her from that race. He won the race with another Brad Cox filly, another one of his own. So, he made a good move there, knowing that, he would have one of his run really well. And now he can bring her over here where, instead of being maybe the fourth choice in that race, she's going to be favored in this spot.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a shrewd move by Mr. Cox. But one thing about Brad Cox and his style is he doesn't leave himself a whole lot of margin of error with these kind of things because he doesn't really run his horses all that much.
Mm-hmm.
And a horse like West Omaha, who I think is kind of a standout in this race,
Yeah.
it's always there. There's always a question mark that the horse won't fire off these kind of layoffs. This one isn't as bad as he normally is. He's usually like, a month and a half, maybe even 2 months between starts, and especially trying to get into a bigger race like the Derby or the Oaks. You don't really have much to kind of mess around with if the horse doesn't fire. But a majority of the time he does get him to fire. So that, I guess that's the good thing. But if you're looking for an alternative, I thought Alley's Beach, who clearly has some talent and is learning how to run. In comparison to everybody else in the field, she's probably a little bit ahead of it. Even though a horse like Band of Gold is 2-1, I really don't like that horse at all. It's a dead closer, and won't be anywhere near the pace like Alley's Beach will. And Alley's Beach doesn't actually need the lead either, which is another good thing. I think, the horse's hand was forcing Alcibiades from the rail, and they kind of had to go, but I don't think it was the most ideal trip. Going to Leparoux here also kind of
Little
makes me
patient,
feel
maybe.
like that, yeah, that they're not going to try to go all out, get good position and kind of stalk, which would be the ideal trip. But at 10-1, she's definitely worth a shot. And the other horse that I was thinking about at a bigger price would be Tapit Janali, I think.
Yeah, she got
um,
she got back into form last time. That was a good effort.
yeah, I'm not really sure what happened in the year's end race, but the others have been pretty good, and she seems to be wanting to kind of step up. But my concern here would be the distance, even though she's out of Tappet, and Warfront on the dam side. She doesn't seem like she wants to go this far. She hasn't really proven it, but you got to get your price on a horse like this. I think she has the potential to kind of jump up. Might not be in this race, but somewhere along the line she's going to. But honestly, I like West Omaha a lot.
She fits really well. Have you seen the show Dave
Yes.
with Little Dicky? When
Yeah.
this horse came last year when I was seeing this horse came up, I was watching the show like right when it was happening. I was rewatching it, and it just reminds me of Ali's song.
Oh
That
my
was this
God.
girl, which
Yes.
is so funny. And it's I messed
Hilarious.
this whole thing up. I did it all back. Whenever I see this horse pop up or just read the name in an article or something, it always reminds me of I am Dave. Dave, love it. Good show. Really funny show to check out. Let me give you a thought or two on a price or two. Midshipman's Dance on the outside is undefeated, and both of the races have come sprinting. So with horses like this, it's always difficult because you never know exactly how it's going to translate, and it usually doesn't translate perfectly to where, oh, this horse was a good closing sprinter, and now they'll just be great going longer. But in particular, just watching her visually, I thought the gallop out on the most recent race was very, very good. And then when you look at the pedigree, which is one of the features of the DRF past performances here, the all access. So her dam Sticks Wonder Girl debuted sprinting, didn't fire, stretched out, won 3 races in a row going long.
Boom.
So dam really perked up going long and won multiple races going long. And then look at some of the siblings in
My
here.
buddy, Demogorgon.
Right? Demi Gorgon has won multiple times going long. Wonder City won going long. So both siblings, as well as the dam, have multiple wins going long. So this horse, being a good sprinter, is kind of an outlier for her pedigree wise, right? We would have expected her to be probably better going a little bit longer, maybe even up to a mile. So I'm going to give her a shot in here. I think she could get a good trip from the outside. She's shown really, really talent and ability, and a really bunch of talent and ability in her first 2 starts. And now it's just, can you put it all together? And at least there's a price here, right? I'm not taking her at 3-1 or 4-1 trying to do this for the first time. She's going to be double digits because the horse that you honestly, West Omaha should be 4-5 in here. In this spot. She really should, based on what she's done, how the trip she could get in here. She beat Perfect Shot, and Perfect Shot actually came back and ran pretty well in that race too, and it franked her form a little bit. And then Band of Gold, sort of on the flip side, if they go really fast, Band of Gold came closing, and she's certainly proven going long, and she can absolutely come closing. I thought you hit the other horse, Alley's Beach. Definitely wanted to make sure that Midshipman's Dance was mentioned. I could even see throwing in the 9 in like tries and stuff. I think this horse is progressing. She's stepping forward. I could see her just sitting like third and falling into a good trip and hitting the board in here at a nice price.
Yeah.
As
I mean,
she's progressing.
It could heat up the pace. So, I can see how somebody could like Band of Gold. It's just not my cup of tea.
Yep. If the versions of that race come, she'll run well. I don't know if it's going to come like that. And the problem is West Omaha is not like she needs the lead. She'll just sit and get a couple length jump on Band of Gold.
You would think,
yes. If it sets up that way. And so there's a look.
It's just crazy that West Omaha has had 5 races, right? This will be the 5th one, and 5 different riders.
Wow. And that's usually a negative, right? But you look at a horse who hasn't really run poorly in any of those races.
No, they're all stellar.
Okay, my man, let's get on over to race number 10 as our my I was telling you right before. So
your guys are out there.
My guys, right? Like, so the gardeners that do the gardening and like the landscaping out in front of our apartment complex, they usually come on Mondays now. And so with me doing all my work from home and recording, I've tried to learn the schedule just so that way I don't set things up right in the middle when they're going to be doing stuff. But this week, Monday was a holiday and we were raining, so they didn't come at their normal time on Monday. So they came on Wednesday, threw me all off a little bit. We were trying to wait. I think they just finished up right now as we move to the second half of the pick 4 sequence. Let's go to race number 10, which is the grade 3 Razorback. And I did read that the number 4 Ain't Life Grand, who was entered in an allowance race on Sunday, is going to run in the allowance race. I think Mary Rampolini said that.
Anyway.
Yeah, so because this was probably, it's good to go in that spot first, and then maybe step back into graded stakes company. Looking through this field, Barry, I thought I found a standout here in this one, and I'm now probably with the scratch of that horse. This horse will probably get bet quite a bit, but I really feel like it's a good spot for Magic Tap.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's the right horse in the right spot, getting the right trip at the right time. You kind of dive into his overall form. He's lost twice to Saudi Crown, and really no knock in those. And every other race, he's been right there in the money. He's run very well. He's proven going longer at 1 1/8. What I like is that he's won right on the lead, basically, and he's come from 3 lengths off the pace sitting. So I know he's got the versatility. Now he's going to make the second start as a 4-year-old, so he could be ready to take a good step forward. It's the Barry Beyer angle as well, where he came back off a few months, ran the same sort of number right in the range he had been running before, and now he can get ready to take a step forward off of that.
Yeah, that's exactly my view. Is he can definitely step up and kind of jump up out of that 94, 95-ish range of buyers into something a little higher. Definitely will get the trip. But one thing I looked at, and I went through all of these horses, right? And I see a lot of speed that's going to stop. Frosted Departure has that kind of profile. Speed Bias has that same kind of profile. Octane does that quite often. U.S. Army probably lasts a lot longer than most of them.
But
but will be head up with at least one or two or three of these horses. Promise Keeper,
Yep.
another one that needs to be forwardly placed. Um, and it kind of got my wheels turning to think that this pace might collapse. And a horse that I'm going to mention is the 12 Escapologist. You know, Kenny McPeak is hard to catch, but it's better to catch him at a price when nobody's expecting it. And
And
this
you
horse
know
has
what you're
been
going to get
running
from this
very
guy.
well. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's been running very well against good competition. Money Supply, two
Magic
starts back,
Tap. He beat Magic Tap a couple starts back.
he did.
Yep.
You know, when the circumstances were right. And this might be that kind of situation. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to rule him out, especially at that price, because he's not going to get bet down to like, 3 to 1 off
And
the
think about
Stonewall
how
Morning line. He's going to be probably somewhere 15 to 12 to 1 range.
this pick four sets up, depending on what type of pick four player you are, how you're going to approach it. It feels like in each race, or in at least a couple of races in the sequence, you can take a stand in those races and then spread in a couple of the others. This might be a fun time to play two different tickets. Maybe you single one horse on one, you single a different horse on the other. You can spread around in a couple of the other races. This is absolutely a horse I'm using on one ticket. No doubt about it.
Yeah,
Because
I
I
think it
think
sets up good.
there are versions of this race where he absolutely gets the trip. The other horse who I kept coming back to just thinking is going to run well is Notary. Man,
Yeah, well,
you just
if you like the 12, you gotta
you
like
got it
Notary.
right. You got to like Notary because Notary has that tactical style where he can sit, he can get the jump. And now, while his races are a little softer, you look at how strong they've come back, and he was right behind Money Supply. He took
Yeah,
the lead in his first off a few months. We saw Money Supply come back last weekend at Fairgrounds, win a graded stakes race. This race has already come back live with a couple next out winners in it. So I do think Magic Tap is the right horse in the right race and will get a good trip. But there are definitely a couple others to include 12, the 11, and even if he really outside, this horse is a bit intriguing to me, Barry, because he's super lightly raced. I hate the post. Like way
yeah,
out
it's
wide.
tough.
I'm very worried about it. But I'm not. I see that speed figure last time out, which was a 96, and you may look at it and go, okay, maybe it sort of came out of nowhere. But really, you dive into the form. He missed some time between May and January, so he came back. He probably needed the start, and now he's putting two starts together. And this horse is pretty lightly raced for a 5-year-old who's just had maybe some physical issues getting to the track and then staying there last year. There still could be a little growing for this guy. It's just the post that
Yeah,
hurts me.
it's tough from way out there. He
Yep.
seems to be, in good form. You see that bullet on February 17th, which is
Mm-hmm.
very encouraging. And there was one other horse that I want to mention is the one Seize the Night. This horse has the chops to win this race,
Yeah,
provided he gets a good trip, and he
I was
will.
in. Go ahead. Yeah, keep going.
It's just a matter of trip, really, because this horse is fast enough to win, and probably will get overlooked a little bit. Probably not as much now that Ain't Life Grand is out, because that'll probably force Magic Tap to be the absolute chalk, which I don't love.
Me neither. And this
Um,
horse, yeah, he'll get bet a little bit, but he could still be forgotten about. And his last race visually, what I liked is that he doesn't like the off track. You can tell he's just
yeah,
not as good on the sloppy track. And watching that race, there were 3 or 4 times he looked done. And this horse kept trying,
it kept
man.
going. Yeah,
He kept trying really hard. He's towards the back of this compact field. He's fit the 6, 3 deep. He's just off, 3 yanks off at most. And the sustained bid in between horses, he couldn't get the Promise Keeper who went gate to wire. It was a good effort. And yeah, I thought he ran really well in there in the Razorback. There's a look
yeah.
at
I
the
mean,
Great Three Razorback.
his speed figures match up with
Well,
the best of them in this race. So I think he's going to be a factor here. But I also think that of all the races that we're going to go over, this one has a lot of potential to have some chaos.
mhm. This is a horse I even want to mention too. I liked this horse last year in a few spots, Midnight Rising. And then he's one who he'd never been on dirt. He'd only been on turf and synthetic, but he'd shown some sneaky ability. And sometimes those races can have just lower speed figures. And then he was on a muddy track and he perked up. And I don't know if it was just the off track. He's just never been given another shot on the dirt. Like, why can't he, third start of the form cycle as a 4-year-old, can he go from where he is at like a 92, step up to the mid 90s, and then put himself right in the mix at 30-1 and just hit the board? Maybe, you know.
Why not? I mean, stranger things have happened. Like, when was it? Last year or the year before when Unho won, and
Mm-hmm.
he was like 1 billion to 1. So,
Yep.
that it stuff happens, especially in races like this where everybody's kind of lukewarm on all of these horses. It should be a fun one to watch.
Let's finish things up at Oaklawn on Saturday with the Grade 2 Rebel. The schedule at Oaklawn was a little different this year. They changed the scheduling of the races, and then they also had a cancellation that pushed the Southwest back, and so it made the time between the Southwest and the Rebel shorter. So you didn't get as many horses coming back in the series because it was just a quick turnaround. You did see Carboni set the pace that day. He will return, but from a discussion point, starting here with Timberlake, who's going to be the heavy favorite. He's 6-5 on the morning line. He's a Grade 1 winner of the Champagne, and he was 4th in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile behind Fierceness, Muth, and Locked. And Timberlake is, I mean, on speed figures and based on what he's done resume, there's nobody else in the field that's really even close to him. But this is what we see with so many horses in prep races like this for Timberlake. It's his first start since the Breeders' Cup. He obviously is trying to get into the Kentucky Derby. So with the timing of this race, that would leave him this race, the Arkansas Derby, or probably one more prep, and then the Kentucky Derby. So for Timberlake, while he stands out on paper, he is probably not going to give you the best effort that he has on Saturday. It probably will be the next time he runs after that, or the second time, the next time after that. So that's the first point with him. The second point is, I don't really know how far back he wants to come from. He's sat pretty close in his wins and in the races where he's run well. When he got a little farther back in the Breeders' Cup, nobody was beating Fierceness that day, but I don't know if he wants to be 5 lengths out of it and come closing. And there could be a fair amount of early speed in this race.
Yeah, there's a lot of question marks here. I mean, on paper, he looks like he should moonwalk and still win this race, but all those factors that you mentioned, he hasn't been out since November 3rd. I mean, we're almost in March.
Yep.
And again, this is that same thing I was just talking about with Brad Cox, where he leaves himself little
Not as much
room
wiggle
for
room.
error.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And there's been horses over the years that have done this and come off the layoff, didn't run well, and then they're not on the trail anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this kind of feels like with Timberlake. Man, it's hard to take a horse like this at a short price.
Yeah.
Coming off that kind of layoff. I mean, you see there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 works coming into this. I don't know, man. That's a tough task, especially at a short price.
Yep.
I tend to shy away from things like that.
Me too. Me too.
A horse that kind of caught my eye is the 10 horse Mena. If you put a line through that December 22nd race at Turfway, the horse didn't run a step. This horse has been steadily improving every race and kind of, peaked a little bit on January 28th here at Oaklawn and behind Northern Flame, who's actually in this race too. But I think this horse can still get better.
And that's
And
in this race. If you take out Timberlake, or if you're doing what we're doing and thinking that Timberlake is probably not going to necessarily run to some of his top speed figures that he's shown, it's basically the 11 who's run some races that are a little better than everyone else, and then there's the rest of the speed figures in a horse like Mena with a 79 last time out, him taking one step forward and getting into the mid 80s, if we would
puts him
project that.
right there with everybody else.
It's not that far off. It really isn't. And the horses for me that I think are a little bit interesting, the horse I'm going to bet if he's over 5-1 is Dematic in here with the blinkers coming on. I'm
Yeah, he
looking
kind of has the same look as Mana,
like
actually.
that progression for him has been great. 2 starts back at Fairgrounds when he finished third. It was a good third, and it was on a fast track. And then he won on a sloppy track, so I'm not necessarily worried about him just being a horse that freaked on a sloppy track. And if Timberlake gets caught up a little early on in the pace here, and I'm going through the rest of this field, Carboni's, in my opinion, they are sending hard from the rail because he tried to sit last time out and that didn't really work. He was sitting second and he actually got a pretty good trip. He was in the 2 path. He just didn't want to go on with it. And it could have been the muddy track that day, could have been not wanting to sit off. I have a feeling that they're just going to go and get very aggressive. And then from the outside, what else can Time for Truth do? Stretching out from 2 sprints. So these 2 horses, inside and outside, could be cooking. And you add into the mix
The
horses,
9.
the 9, Lagnos, Next
The 8.
Level,
Yep,
who could be
the 8.
right there. Timberlake, fresh. I don't think wants to be way out of it. Tejon Pass doesn't want to be too far out of it. And then the 2 inside horses, the 1 and the 2. Northern Flame was right in the mix and on the lead last time out. And both of his 2 victories have come wire to wire. So that's the type of horse who they'll probably say, hey, even if we have to go a little faster early, let's make sure we're close up because we've never really passed horses. We got to be in the mix, even if you got to ride this horse. So now there could be combos of 4, 5, 6 horses in here, all showing speed. I'm looking for some of the true sitters and closers. And the one that I just keep coming back to that I think is going to get the trip about 5 lengths off is Dematic.
Yeah. Yep. He has the same kind of profile as Mana.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that'll be good. I mean, Just Steel dances all the dances.
Yep.
But very inconsistent, and you really don't know what kind of where you're going to sit with this horse. I would think they want the same kind of trip that
and
that
they could be
Maddox
really
is going to get
wide,
to. Yeah.
sitting. I love that in the last few races, he's shown that he can pass horses. Major positive for him. He was a little more one-dimensional early in his career. And now we know he can sit and he can pass horses. The problem is he's going to be wide in here. And I would want him. He's the type of horse you like playing as an underlay, not as the second choice in this race.
Correct. Yes.
Like
Yeah,
he's a horse that you like at 8 or 12-1 because you feel like you get a good run for your money. He's going to hang around. He'll probably hit the board. Maybe he could fall into it. If he's the strong second choice in a race like this, that feels like less than the type of price I'd want to play him with.
Well, not only that, he loses lengths finishing races this long off, which
and he's going to be wide.
Is definitely a red flag. Yeah. So if, bet away if you really want, but they are not going to get my money on this one. And one thing too about Carboni, he kind of fell into 2 really exceptional trips.
Mm-hmm.
And those numbers, those buyer speed figures are a little bit inflated because of that, because the light line race on New Year's Eve, Northern Flame took the worst of the break there and was going to be head up with Carboni. And
it changed the complexion of the race.
Right. And Carboni got the trip of a lifetime. So that one I'm totally against. I looked at that one kind of hard because I was just trying to find somebody else, but I'm just against that one completely.
There's a way in here where I could actually see the one going hard and the horse on the outside, like sitting just behind him. And this horse has talent. Time for Truth for sure. Mm-hmm. This is just a
terrible
tough
post.
Like it's a terrible post, and it's a tough spot going from 6 straight out to 1 1/16 against stakes company like this with a bunch of other speed. But that debut race was good, and his loss to Valentine Candy, that is a nice horse. Valentine Candy has won 3 straight stakes races at Oaklawn Park. He was in that really controversial maiden race last year at Saratoga where they flipped the buyer up a bit, and then there were horses that kept coming back running well out of it, so they improved the buyer. And so he's got ability. He's a good sprinter, and there's no shame in losing to him sprinting. It's just one of those races where there's a lot of speed. If this was a less early, like a race that had a little bit less early speed, I would give the 13 more of a look. Kind of curious to see what let's see real quick before we finish up and get out of here. What does Timeform US say? Yeah. So their pace projector here on Timeform US has it as the very fast pace,
Fast.
as you can see, with the 13, the 7, the 4, and the 1 all in the mix, and a bunch of horses in the next tier right behind. Finishing positions, they think the 7 will get the victory, and obviously on paper that's that horse stands out there. But as far as the pace is concerned, I think that's how we're hoping to try to beat the horse, in that this horse is fresh, gets caught up with a couple others, and we're looking for horses that are going to be sitting off of it a little bit. Barry pointed out the 10 Mena. I point out the 6 a Dymatic, who we both think can get those trips sitting maybe 3-ish to 5 lengths off. That would be ideal. And then if you're playing big, tries and supers, a couple horses that I just think they're going to pass horses in here, Barry, so I could see them hitting the board, is the 3 Common Defense. He just may not have been quite as good on the mud, but he was in a spot. He passed horses, and Mystic Dan wins that race by 8. And then Liberal Arts finishes 3rd by 9. So with those two horses, with the top horses seeming that they took a little bit better to the off track that day, I think Common Defense could at least hit the board. And I could see the same thing with Magic Grant as just a pure closer in here, knowing that, hey, let's eliminate his last race. That was in the mud, in a sloppy, muddy track right here at Oaklawn. But before that, he wasn't that far behind Otto the Conqueror, who's a speed horse. He won the Clever Trevor coming from way out of it in a race that melted down. And he can certainly pass half the field in here and maybe sneak into the mix at a massive, massive price and like hitting the 3rd or the 4th spot. So if you're playing a try or a super, I would throw some of these just pure closers in the mix.
Yeah, I thought Woodcourt actually is sneaky in
Mm-hmm.
this spot too, because the horse was well
Same
met
thing.
early, but then got claimed 2 back in December, and then went to the dirt and won. Um, Cipriano Contreras doesn't kind of mess around. He's 28% at this meet and is pretty good off the claim. So, and it looks like he claimed him for himself. So it definitely worth noting and taking a long look at a big long shot that can get in the money there.
Barry, as we finish up, let the folks know what you have going on with Big Mondays, going in circles, and where they could find more from you.
Yeah, Big Monday, every Monday/Tuesday. Uh, we come out with the episode. Usually they're very long, so pack a lunch. And beyond that, kind of here and there doing some stuff. And that's pretty much about it. But yeah, definitely check out Going in Circles podcast. We do it.
Barry's here with me every week. We'll kind of bounce around, and if there's one big weekend, one big track that weekend, we'll usually take that one. Last week we hit Fairgrounds. Next weekend we'll bounce back over to Gulfstream. They have the Holy Bull.
Oh yeah.
I might get another guest or two to help me out with some of the other tracks. Maybe I can get someone for Santa Anita, and with New York. Maybe I'll see if Maddie wants to join me, talk about some of the New York Stakes races coming up next weekend as well. Barry, buddy, thank you so much. This one's interesting because there are some logical favorites that look like if they were to show up and run their best, they're going to be tough. But we see these sequences all the time, and very rarely are you going to have all three or 4 of them show up and all fire. And a horse like Timberlake is the exact template of a horse that, hey, they just might not be at their best right now. And we kind of think that maybe they aren't, maybe they're one of those horses that was kind of good early at 2 and maybe doesn't take the big step forward to 3. It seems like we both feel like that horse may not quite be as good as some of the speed figures would suggest.
Yeah, and from a wagering perspective, if you're playing, let's say even a pick 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, you know, you're not missing much when you leave off chalk.
Nope.
There's certain instances where the chalk play is, you just can't avoid it. Um, but you want to try to, because that's how you make the nice scores that you want to post on Twitter and stuff like that. You got to be different from the crowd, and playing against favorites is the best way to do it.
Barry and I will be back next week. We'll be talking some Gulfstream Park, Fountain of Youth Day. There's a big contest also. Glad I remembered to mention that. Next week on Saturday, it's the Ultimate Betting Challenge at ExpressBet. You can actually play expressbet.com at Santa Anita or at Gulfstream Park. This is one of the bigger contests actually of the year. It's a $6,000 buy-in. And so that's a ton. For a lot of us, that's a lot to spend to try to buy into a contest. The day before that, March 1st, there's a $600 qualifier. So that way you can win your way in. And in the next week and a half leading up to that, there are $40 feeders that you can play. For $40, you qualify for the $600 game, and then you're just one step away from winning your way in. So you can literally turn your $40 entry into a $6,000 spot in the tournament. And for example, if there's 150 players, which they're shooting for, that's $150,000 in cash prizes and 4 NHC seats that First
Nice.
Racing is putting in there. So this is a big, big tournament. And what's cool, it's the full card on Fountain of Youth Day, the full card on Big Cap Day. All Gulfstream, all Santa Anita that you can bet from. Tons of options, and think about it. It'll start early at Gulfstream and roll all the way to the end of Santa Anita. So it's an all-day long tournament as well. They are calling it the full day coast-to-coast betting extravaganza.
That's what it is.
It is.
You know what's funny about that in the feeders is sometimes the feeders end up being harder.
Oh yeah, because everybody's doing the same thing.
Everybody wants to do the same thing, right? Get a nice return on a $40 investment.
So you're battle tested by the time you get through some of those,
Exactly, and the fields get a little smaller as you go up through, the feeders, and it's definitely a good experience if you haven't done it, and you want to get into contests, is to try one of those lower level games, because they're pretty tough. And then you can kind of feel your way on game theory and how you strategize yourself. But yeah, man, those things are so much fun.
Folks, thanks so much for hanging out with us here each and every week. We wish you all the best of luck. Give me a follow on Twitter at It's Me, Gino B. Check out Barry, the sniper, at Urban Handicapper there on Twitter, on the X, at URBN Handicapper. Barry, what I love too, it's Wednesday. We've already got this in the books. That's so great. Right? That's what's shout out to Oaklawn Park. And we've seen they had these races out. They were drawn on Sunday. By Monday, all the fields had morning line odds. It can be done.
Yes, it's possible.
Be done. And it doesn't have to be every single day, but for the 3 or 4 really big days a year at tracks, if they can do this and get it out a little bit earlier, well, boom. Now we put this video out. Now, by the time Wednesday night hits, some people have already watched this. So by Thursday, they get a little look at Oaklawn. They start looking. And then for the next couple of days, people that do podcasts or write articles or put reports out can all be a little bit ahead. Everybody's already got Oaklawn thinking, and it always helps to handle. It just always makes people care more about those races when you've got a few extra days to talk about them and just get it out there, especially in the racing world, right? Because social media and posting these videos and stuff for a sport that isn't quite like football, that does a whole lot.
Absolutely.
Like just getting that out there and getting the awareness and reminding people, oh, hey, boom, this weekend, it's Rebel weekend, 4 stakes and all stakes pick 4, a couple graded stakes, Derby and Oaks points on the line. And you get a little help from Gino and Barry. Good luck, everyone. We hope you crush it this weekend out at Oaklawn Park. We'll talk some Gulfstream with you next week.